Hello everybody, in this video we are going to be measuring Frank Castle from The Punisher and determining exactly what brain type he has. So you can see here we have all these different brain types, and based off his predator and prey traits that we are able to identify, we will add up all of his predator and prey traits and determine exactly what brain he has, whether he has an apex predator brain, a middle tier prey brain, etc. Obviously the best here is apex predator, the worst is low tier prey. So the Punisher version of Castle is extremely high on Predator traits, but not fully Apex in Predator maxing framework because his nervous system is heavily contaminated by trauma, rage persistence, and hypervigilance. So let's find out where he exactly lands on Predator maxing scale. So first we're going to run through the Predator traits that he possesses. Firstly is attention control. He's very high in attentional control. He maintains deep focus even under chaos and sensory overload. The exact example is during season 1. During the construction site assassination attempt, Frank is fully focused on eliminating targets despite being outnumbered and wounded. Number 2 is situational awareness. He again is extremely high in this, one of his strongest traits. An exact example is in season 1. Frank immediately notices the veteran support group member, this guy here, behaving unnaturally before learning he is tied to Agent Orange. Next is behavioral efficiency, which again he is very high in. For example, he wastes very little energy or movement during his operations. In season 1, in this specific scenario, he uses a sledgehammer and construction tools already present on site instead of overcomplicating his attack. Let me just zoom out. There we go. And then over here, we've got the next one. We've got strategic restraint and timing, which he is again high in. Frank often waits for tactical advantages before acting. An exact example is in season 1, he spends significant time surveilling the black market operation before attacking. Next is number 5, adaptive arousal regulation, which he is very high in during combat. Frank can switch from calm to lethal almost instantly. In season 2 at the roadside diner, he goes from relaxed conversation with Amy to immediate lethal response within seconds of attack. When this guy is harassing Amy at the diner bar and he picks up on it, he tells him to stop. This guy gets pissed off because he's drunk, pokes Frank, messes with Frank a little bit, and then Frank dislocates his finger. Then he smashes a beer bottle, and then the big fat guy comes in and sorts him out. Number 6, decisive execution. He is extremely high in this. Once Frank commits, hesitation nearly disappears. In season 1, he immediately shoots the cartel hitman during the hallway confrontation without prolonged deliberation. There's a group of guys here, and they're all prepared to kill him, and he immediately, without hesitation, just shoots every single one of them. So 7 is controlled assertiveness, high but imperfect. Frank uses force strategically, but rage sometimes contaminates proportionality. For example, in season 1, he intimidates criminals efficiently during interrogations without unnecessary theatrics. And this is when he's interrogating a man called Jake. Next, we move on to number 8, risk calibration, which he is high in. Frank accepts danger realistically rather than recklessly most of the time. For example, in season 2, he chooses defensive positioning inside the police station instead of blindly charging attackers. Obviously used the wrong photo here. Number 9 is sustained persistence, which he is extremely high in. One of his strongest traits, for example, in season 2, after being severely wounded multiple times protecting Amy, he still continues pursuit. This is when they're in the diner and these random people are trying to hunt down this girl called Amy. He notices it, he catches on, so he goes to protect her, and in a fight in the toilets, he gets hurt a fair bit, but he just continues to fight in order to save her. Then they walk out into the bar. There's loads of more people that try to kill them and basically get Amy, and he persists to protect and save her. Number 10 is rapid emotional recovery, low to moderate. Major weakness for Frank. Frank repeatedly relives his family's deaths through flashbacks and hallucinations across both seasons. So that's a bad trait for him because he's low in it. Cooperative strategy and coordination is moderate. Frank can coordinate well but prefers isolation. His partnership with Micro in season 1 shows strong tactical cooperation and division of roles. However, it obviously takes him a while to overcome his stubbornness in order to partner with Micro to be way more effective, whereas if he did it on his own, it would not have been as effective at all. Number 12 is predictive pattern recognition, which is very high. Frank constantly anticipates behavior and tactical flow. For example, he quickly realizes Lewis Wilson is psychologically unstable before others fully recognize the danger. This is when he's in the therapy session with Kirk with all the army guys around the table, and there's this kid called Lewis who is basically psychologically unstable, and he picks up on it, and we know he's psychologically unstable because Lewis goes on to basically be a terrorist. Next is cognitive flexibility and adaptability. He is high in, he's operationally adaptable and emotionally rigid. In the prison fight, Frank uses weights, chains, walls, and improvised weapons fluidly. 14 is trial and error optimization, which he is high in. Frank learns quickly from direct feedback. For example, after early ambushes in season 1, he upgrades his safe house security and operational methods. 15 is engagement-driven motivation, which is extremely high. Frank becomes most alive during pursuit and resistance. For example, throughout both seasons, civilian normality visibly fails to engage him psychologically, but obviously when he's in pursuit, when he's in action, he's very engaged. Number 16 is commitment locking, which he's extreme in. Once engaged, Frank becomes psychologically unstoppable. For example, his pursuit of Rawlins, this guy, who is responsible for the black market operation that we previously covered in a different trait. And so Frank obviously hates him because, well, this guy was kind of expecting Frank and the other soldiers that he sent into this operation to die. So his pursuit of Rawlins continues despite overwhelming resistance. 17 is high signal to noise perception, which is very high, and Frank filters distractions effectively during action. For example, during massive firefights, he ignores panic and emotional chaos while tracking tactical priorities. This is an example of when Rawlins, the guy we just covered, actually sent in high-level soldiers to a place where Frank did not expect them to be able to find him, to kill Frank and the friend that he was with. Number 18 is low cognitive load operation, which he is moderate to high in. Efficient during combat, overloaded outside it. For example, in action sequences, Frank acts fluidly with minimal hesitation or over-analysis. Number 19 is independent social calibration, which he is extremely high in. Frank is almost entirely internally governed. For example, he ignores law enforcement pressure repeatedly. This is in the police station when they're telling him to do certain things. They're questioning him in certain ways, and he could respond in ways that would be more likely to free him, but he doesn't. He just says what the fuck he wants to say, basically. And for example, I can't remember her name, but the main police officer, Donnie, I think it is, something along the lines of that, that is all throughout season 1 and 2, he practically does what he wants, even if she's told him not to do it because she'll have to lock him up or something along the lines of that. 20 is emotional non-contamination during action, high but incomplete. Frank compartmentalizes emotions well during missions, for example. He can continue fighting effectively immediately after emotionally triggering effects. So they're all the Predator traits, and there was a couple in there that he was weak in, but for the majority of them, he was very strong in them. So now we'll go on to his strongest prey traits, which are responsible for preventing apex, so the apex predator brain classification. So Firstly, threat vigilance, he is very high in. Frank is almost never psychologically relaxed. He constantly scans rooms and entrances automatically. He sleeps lightly and wakes instantly to noise throughout the series. Next is persistent vigilance, which he's extreme in. Frank cannot disengage from threat monitoring. He repeatedly checks surroundings, even during safe conversations. Next is high sensory and emotional reactivity. His nervous system reacts intensely to emotional triggers. For example, mentions of his family immediately alter his emotional state. We have associative fear learning, which he's high in. His trauma strongly governs his behavioral structure. For example, his entire identity is organized around the murder of his family. Then we've got emotional persistence after failure, which again he's high in. Frank never fully releases emotional wounds. And an exact example is years later, the death of his family still governs his behavior completely. So now we will go on to the final rank, which you can't actually see yet. Let me just scroll it down nice and slow. So the final rank, this is combining all of the traits we've just been through to determine exactly what type of brain Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, would have. And we are going to be placing him at MTP, Middle Tier Predator. So this is the second best brain on the list. And he has temporary AP, so Apex Predator-like operational states during mission execution. So Frank Castle is a middle tier predator when it comes to his brain and his conduct, his behavior, his cognitive abilities, etc.